What is pop locking and dropping, my musical comrades? Today I'm going to be showing each and every one of you how you can make beats in the style of Babytron and BLP Kosher. Now, I did a BLP Kosher tutorial not too long ago, but this is going to be more along the lines of that authentic Detroit Flint sound. So without any further hoopla, the beat that we're going to be going over today sounds a little something like this. Alright, so the first thing I'm gonna go over is the melody. And the first thing that I threw down is this super simple piano pattern playing from Addictive Keys. And to build a piano pattern similar to this, you really only need 3 steps. Now, the first step is gonna be creating a bass line. And for these super dark and sinister beats, I like to start my bass lines off on the 1 of the scale. More often than not, I'll just have that 1 be the bass line for the first 4 bars. And then for the next 4 bars, I'll use 2 notes that are a half step away from each other. And in any minor scale, there's gonna be 2 half step intervals. And for the F minor scale, those intervals are C sharp and C, and G sharp and G. It's really all just up to personal preference, whichever one you want to use. But generally, I really like the sound of a 1-6-5 progression. So now that we've got our bass line down, we're going to throw on some chords an octave up. And I like to stick with basic triads for these kind of dark beats. I don't really like to experiment with like 7ths or 9ths because those tend to be a little bit more emotional, and I want this to just be super dark and sinister. So for the first 4 bars, I just have a repeating F minor triad. And then for the next 4 bars, I repeat the 3rd and the 5th of that triad, but integrate our C sharp and C half step interval. By keeping a top note stagnant like this, you're not only creating a lot of tension with the melody, but you're also keeping it stupid simple so that the listener and or rapper isn't distracted by the melody. So with that being said, this is what the chords sound like. And now the third and final step for creating those authentic Detroit piano melodies is going to be throwing down some sort of arpeggiation. Now, I'm not going to go too in detail on how to create these arpeggios, but what I like to do is I like to start with the root of our scale and build off of that using half step intervals and whatever other notes that might sound good. Now, for these kind of beats, generally, I'll just make the arpeggio a bar long and copy it over. And then towards the end of the 4 bars, I'll throw in some variation just to keep it interesting. And yet another thing that I like to do with these arpeggios to keep it interesting is going to be transposing it up by an octave in the last 4 bars. And the final thing that I did was I selected the entire melody and hit Alt-R, and then from there I just randomized the velocity so that it wasn't just one stagnant volume. So with that being said, this is what our piano melody sounds like. All the effects on that are pretty standard, but the only one that sticks out is going to be Crystallizer. And I just have it on the chorus Pong delay preset. That just gives it that wobbly sound and makes it a little bit more stereo separated. So now that we've got the piano out of the way, let's go into the next part of the melody. And that is going to be this choir from Analog Lab, being the female choir. And all I have this doing is playing a super simple pattern. And it's alternating between an F minor triad and a suspended second. Basically, that just means that I took the 3rd of the melody and put it down by 1 semitone. I really hate using words like this, but this is a legitimate like cheat code when it comes to getting a dark sound out of your melodies. And towards the end of this melody, yet again, I have that C sharp and C half step interval to tie this into the piano melody. So with that being said, this is what the choir sounds like. Yet again, the effects on that are pretty simple, but the only one that sticks out is Valhalla Supermassive. And I have this to give it that really massive gospel sound. Now with those 2 components, there's a lot of mid and high end presence in the melody, but there isn't anything that's really filling in those low ends. So to conquer that issue, I threw down a pad yet again from Analog Lab, being the D player pad, and I have it playing our original chord progression from the piano. When making melodies, for me at least, it's important to fill out all of the frequency ranges, because to my ears, that just makes your melody sound a whole lot more full and complete. So with that being said, this is what the pad sounds like. Now, another problem that I ran into when creating this melody is that I thought it sounded too natural. I wanted to throw in some really weird synthetic components to kind of make the melody unique in its own way. And for that, yet again, I pulled a pad from Analog Lab, and I have it playing our original arpeggiation, but it just resides within 1 octave. But what really seals the deal about this melodic component is going to be Backmask. Not only is the UI for this VST fucking sick, but the sounds that you can get from it are super unique. So with that being said, this is what that pad sounds like. And now there's one thing that you cannot forget when making Detroit style beats, and that is going to be some kind of high wobbly synth lead. And for this, I decided to go with the Theramin preset from Xenology. And I just have this playing a stupid simple pattern, which is actually replicating our bass line, but it's pitched up by 7 semitones. So our original bass line is F, C sharp, and C, but pitched up by 7 semitones, it's C, G sharp, and G, which is also yet again making use of those half-step intervals. Nothing really much to go over with this lead, but this is what it sounds like. So with that being said, this is what our entire melody sounds like together. And if you want to know how I mix my melodies, you can check out the video in the top right, whichever one is right. And in that video, I go into great detail on how I mix my melodies. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's go over the drums. And arguably the most important part of Detroit style drums is sound selection. And nearly every single drum sound in this beat is from the modern Detroit kit. I think I just found this kit on Reddit. If I can find it again, I'll link it in the description. But it has those super authentic sounding Detroit snares, Detroit Percs, Detroit hi-hats, Detroit 808s. So by using these Detroit staple sounds, we're able to get a much more authentic outcome. So with that being said, the first thing that I threw down is an 808. And to match the signature Detroit style, I adjusted the out knob so that the 808 is super short. And I just have this playing a super standard pattern following our bass line. Nothing too crazy to go over here. The next thing that I threw down is this kick roughly following that 808 pattern. Yet again, nothing too crazy to go over here. The next thing that I threw down is a snare. And when searching for a snare, I wanted to have that super high timbre, punchy Detroit style snare. And I was able to find one that matched exactly what I was looking for in that Detroit kit. After that, I threw down the super bright hi-hat with a lot of high-end presence. And I just have it playing a basic 2-step pattern. I didn't want to go too crazy with the hats. After that, I threw down an open hat as well as some reverse open hats, but this tutorial is already feeling a little bit bloated and that's not really integral to making Detroit style beats. So I'm going to skip over that and go into what is integral, being percussion. Now, I'm no Detroit resident. If I was, I'm sure I'd have my hair taken or something. But what really seals the deal with authenticity is going to be these percs. So I threw down this perc, and this perc. Now with the more short and clicky percs, I like to throw them in towards the end of each drum phrase, as it kind of provides a little send-off for the drum phrase and leads into the next portion. So with that being said, this is what the drums sound like all together. And similarly with my melodies, I also have a video on how I mix my drums. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out in the top right. I still don't know which one's right. So yeah, with that being said, that is going to pretty much cover how to make some Detroit beats in the style of Babytron and BLP Kosher. I thoroughly hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. Also consider checking out my Patreon where I post the FLPs to all of my beats in all of my videos. That way, if you wanted to study the arrangement, the mixing, the mastering, all that kind of stuff, it's right at your fingertips. And finally, consider subscribing as I post 1 tutorial a week and 2 sound kits a month. Other than that, that's going to be it. Peace.